Good afternoon and welcome to UK Column Live. It's Monday the 10th of December 2012 and I'm in the studio this afternoon with Mike Robinson.
Afternoon.
Here in Plymouth, England, southwest of England to be precise, and outside we've got a lovely sunny day. We've actually got a blue sky. It's very cold but a nice day, so thank you for that. Well, we're going to start off this morning, of course, with our illustrious leader, the man who tells the country what we're to do, what we're to eat, the only man with an opinion, and of course that's David Cameron. What's interesting here is in the Telegraph article, Mr. Cameron, of course, is actually being told what he can and cannot do. And this article is pointing out that Cecilia Malmström, the EU Home Affairs Commissioner, has been telling Mr. Cameron that, of course, it's very difficult to claw back any powers from the European Union, in particular 136 powers. And she points out that on each of these opt-ins there will have to be a negotiation and the other member states will have to agree. And it's complex because many of these 136 laws may be many are very connected. So this is classic European Union. Of course, Mr. Cameron likes to tell the country that he can do as he pleases, but at the moment he's completely under the control of the European Union. Meanwhile, he's still dithering as to whether he will give the country a referendum on in or out, and whether he does or whether he doesn't. Of course, this is treasonous because we can't give away our constitution to a foreign power.
Well, it does say later in the article there is speculation that Mr. Cameron will go into the next election promising to give UK voters a referendum on whether to stay in the EU. Is this not what he did at the last election?
Well, I think he constantly does it because that keeps people disturbed. They don't really know what's happening. And I think Mr. Cameron just routinely lies to people about what he is and isn't going to do.
Well, indeed, but is anybody going to buy it? I mean, that's almost as bad as buying chemical weapons in Syria, isn't it?
Well, unfortunately, I think there's still a lot of mainstream Tories out there that are following this man out of idle curiosity. So we'll move on fairly quickly. A couple of interesting stories to do with the NHS. This is being pushed quite strongly by several of the papers, but we've just decided to have a look at the Express and the Telegraph. And the subject is the mapping of patients' DNA. And of course, the NHS is bankrupt and has no money for conventional treatment. But all of a sudden 100 million has appeared to help map out patients' DNA. And of course David Cameron has come forward and he wants to push the boundaries by introducing genetic sequencing to a mainstream health service for the first time. Britain has often led the world in scientific breakthroughs and medical innovations, from this first CT scan and test tube baby through to decoding DNA. And of course David Cameron, extremely knowledgeable on all these subjects, and he says it's crucial that we continue to push the boundaries, and this new plan will mean we are the first country in the world to use DNA codes in the mainstream of the health service. Of course, if we move on to the Telegraph, we're seeing this a little bit more clearly because the article is pointing out that Sir John Bell, Professor of Medical Sciences at Oxford University and advisor on genetics to the government, and chair of the Human Genomics Strategy Group, has made his comments as David Cameron launched a national DNA database of up to 100,000 patients. But of course what they're saying is that the cost of actually sequencing people is falling to as little as £100, and it won't be very long before everybody can actually have their unique identifying code. Some would say that's the mark of the beast. But it's interesting that money can actually be found for this DNA sequencing, while, as I say, we can't afford traditional treatments. Watch this space. Another little article to do with the NHS, which I think is significant, is that apparently now elderly people who have a fall and break bones are going to be screened to see whether they're mentally ill or suffering from dementia. And I wonder whether this is another fishing net, effectively, that we can start to label even more vulnerable elderly people as being mentally ill, and presumably the government can then put them on the appropriate care pathway to remove them from the NHS. So watch what's happening here with the NHS and policy at the moment, and bear in mind that we're pushing strongly for eugenics.
Euthanasia.
Euthanasia, I beg your pardon. Owen Paterson MP has been pretty outspoken recently on a number of subjects, but the Independent here has picked up that he's talking about genetically modified food, which he thinks should be grown and sold widely in the UK. The important thing is generally the arrogance of this man when he's talking. Here he is, of course, he looks extremely knowledgeable in his role of Secretary for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. If we look into his background, his professional career has been in the leather industry, so he doesn't seem to have a lot of professional knowledge in health and nutrition, but he's pretty outspoken in trying to ram through the use of genetically modified food. And he says the trouble with all this stuff about Frankenstein foods and putting poisons, the trouble is all this stuff about Frankenstein foods and putting poisons in foods. There are real benefits, and what you've got to do is sell the real environmental benefits. Well, we have news from Mr. Patterson because, of course, many people worldwide are now pointing out the inherent dangers of many of the additives to our food, and they're also pointing out the dangers of Codex Alimentarius, which will mean that the state will tell us what we can eat and will also remove natural foods from our menus. So I don't think I trust this gentleman very much.
Well, that last sentence there, there are real benefits, and what you've got to do is sell the real environmental benefits. He's admitting what his role is as a member of the cabinet, as an MP. It is to sell the policy to the people, not to represent the people's views in Parliament. That's contrary to what it should be, of course.
And of course, if his environmental benefits are Agenda 21, ultimately we want to, or that plan is to remove a very large percentage of the world population by any means possible, vaccination, so presumably poison food is part of that. Do watch that one carefully. Another Tory who has been coming into the press is Michael Fabricant. I believe he's the deputy chairman of the Tory party, and he's suddenly waxing lyrical about the need basically to remove restrictions on drugs. So it's quite interesting at a time when Britain is in dire straits with the economy, over jobs, over education, over the NHS. We now see the Tory party moving to another subject which is clearly going to cause angst and division in people's minds and doesn't help the critical point at the moment, as we shall shortly see, that people in this country can't actually feed themselves. So I don't know what this guy is up to, but I think this is propaganda to keep people's minds muddled and off the wider agenda of the Tory party.
I mean, I think it's very, very dangerous. People have their own personal views about taking drugs and so on, but at a time when economically people are starting to really hurt, they tend to run to things which take the pain away. So to decriminalise hard drugs like crack and heroin at this point, I believe could only result in further breakdown of society.
Which is what they want.
Which is what they want, yeah.
Well, here's some of the truth coming out. An Express article, which is very interesting because it's putting in different analysis on how many people are out of work. And I know, Mike, you were smiling when you saw this because here is the Express finally catching up on what UK Column Live has been reporting and you've been talking about. So a leading economist, Dr. John Philpott, said that the work shortage rate was 23.2%, 3 times higher than headline unemployment, and the total includes over 2.5 million unemployed, 3 million underemployed, and 2.3 million economically inactive. Dr. Philpott, director of the Jobs Economist, said unemployment has not reached the levels feared at the start of the financial crisis, but it's totally wrong to conclude that the labour market has got off lightly. On the contrary, the degree of pain inflicted on the labour market has been as severe as expected. It's just that the pain has been diffused differently than in previous recessions. What's your comment on that then, Mike?
I think we haven't seen anything yet. I've said it many times, the government is doing nothing to develop our economy, quite the contrary. Everybody's kind of sitting back and waiting for things to happen in their own due course. And of course, if you sit back and do nothing, nothing's going to change. So the situation is not improving. We're not providing or generating or creating any high quality jobs. We're replacing high quality jobs with low quality jobs. Exports are failing because other economies are in exactly the same situation. There's no part of the world that's going to provide us with a get out of jail card. So the situation is only going to get worse. And as I said when I showed the graph a number of issues ago, it's the economically inactive group that I'm particularly interested in, because what are these people doing?
Yeah,
there must be a black economy out there that government
for people to survive.
Or they're not surviving.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have a look at this, aren't we? So the next article we've got is from the Irish Times, which you picked up.
Right, so what I wanted to demonstrate here was that it's not just in the UK that corporations like Google are not paying their tax. So this is from the Irish Times. Google has defended reports that it paid just 0.14% of tax on revenues of over 47 billion euros. Now in Ireland, the corporation tax rate, there's two corporation tax rates. There's 12.5% for trading income, 25% for non-trading income. But even if we assume that Google has only received income from trade, then it should have paid 6 billion euros. Now Google's excuse is that, well, we invested 75 million pounds on our newly opened data center. We've invested 226 million, sorry, this is euros, I should say, on the acquisition of 3 office buildings in Dublin, and they're providing jobs. But they paid 75 million euros in tax, and how many jobs could have been created with the 6 billion euros that they could have paid, that they should have paid? So just to highlight that these corporations are, it's not just in Britain, and you do wonder whether they're paying tax anywhere.
Well, I think I'm right in saying, wasn't one of the Google chief executives godmother to one of the Cameron children? I may be completely wrong on that, but then
could have been Eric Schmidt. I don't remember, but well, the less said the better. But if you thought, I mean, I'm kind of split on this because it is unacceptable that these companies are not paying corporation tax. On the other hand, if they had paid the money, what would it have been used for? Well, in Britain's case,
it would have been thrown away.
Yes.
Yeah. So look on the bright side, gold.
This is fascinating. This is once again an article, this time on CNET. They're gasping over the amount of gold in the Bank of England, and they're saying that there is 197 billion pounds worth of gold in the vaults of the Bank of England, and they've produced a nice little video to demonstrate it. And this echoes an article that was in the Mail. When was that? February this year. Yeah. Very, very similar ilk. And we've got to remember that Britain's gold reserve is now only 310 tons because of Brown's Bottom, as it's known, when he sold half of our gold reserves at the bottom of the market. So this is 156 billion pounds worth, and 197 billion pounds worth at today's value. This is really, I believe, them talking about the amount of... Britain does not own this gold. Most of this gold belongs to other people, right? Right. So this is what Max Kaiser has been talking about for several months now. This is Britain bragging about the fact that they hold other people's gold, because when we fall over the fiscal cliff and the economies actually do go bang at the end of the day, doesn't matter that this gold is owned by other people.
Yeah.
It's held in the vaults of
So
the Bank of England.
this is what? This is almost the City of London boasting.
Yes. Yes,
You
we
know?
hold your gold. This is a currency war that's going on. This is what Kaiser's been talking about for a long time now. He's made the point that the Federal Reserve Bank holds a lot of gold that belongs to Germany, but when it really happens, Germany will not get that gold back.
Yeah.
And the Federal Reserve will write a note to Germany, say an IOU, saying we've got this gold.
Yeah.
It's the same here. City of London is bragging that they've got other people's gold. And the implication in both the Mail article and the CNET article is that it's the UK's gold. It isn't.
Yeah. And of course, the point you've made there is a lot of people have forgotten that it was Gordon Brown who simply sold off the nation's gold reserves at a low in the market, leaving us with a few hundred tons, while other European countries are in the 1,000, 3,000 or 3,500, I think it is for Germany, somewhere around that.
Well, you could argue that that was yet another act of treason.
Yeah.
I think we probably should.
Okay. So what about money and paper money? The Telegraph, I think, had an interesting take on this.
Well, De La Rue, which traditionally has been printing our money, apparently is quite likely to lose the contract because the Bank of England has put the contract out to tender for the first time. De La Rue took over printing Britain's money after it bought, sorry, I've lost it here. Well, it doesn't matter. They bought the company that actually owned the printing presses, if you like, if you want to put it that way. So the Bank of England has now put this process out to tender, and whoever wins the tender will take ownership of that equipment. And basically, it's another asset being sold off to potentially sold off to foreign buyers.
I'm very suspicious about this because obviously who prints your banknotes is a pretty critical matter, and we've got massive financial instability starting. We've got massive breakdown around the corner, and now all of a sudden a reliable company that's been doing this for a long time is being edged out in favour. What's going on? There's something going on behind the scenes.
Well, they're selling the rights to print our money to a foreign,
unaccountable foreign.
Potentially, I mean, it has gone out to tender, so it remains to be seen. But remember, our banknotes are the only part of our currency which is interest-free, in the sense that an order is placed with a supplier to provide banknotes, and there's no interest attached to those banknotes.
Initially.
Well, the banks then buy the banknotes and then use those to they attach interest to them at that point. But
start the
initially
process
that's
of
true.
debt.
Indeed.
Okay, what else have we got here?
So in the United States, this is from Zero Hedge, absolutely incredible situation. Zero Hedge is reporting that now 47.7 million Americans are living in poverty and requiring food stamps.
Let me just read the title on this, because I think that some viewers will have problems. This has obviously been taken off Zero Hedge website, but the headline there, which you can faintly see in black, is "Food Stamps Soar by Most in 16 Months. Over 1 million Americans enter poverty in the last 2 months." And then obviously there's a supporting graph which is talking about American food stamps at a monthly change, which is in millions. I'm sorry that the figures and text is so small on that one.
Yeah, 47.7 million Americans now requiring food stamps. The monthly increase, according to Zero Hedge, is the highest since May 2011. I mean, this is an incredible situation, isn't it? That the world's largest economy has 200 million people, and that number of people in poverty.
Yeah,
where are we going, and how are we going to get this economic situation resolved under the present policies? It ain't going to happen.
We're not. We've obviously got to take control of issuing our own currency and doing it as credit and not debt is the answer, isn't it? But it's amazing to see what isn't being reported, of course, by our old friends, the BBC. And can I just say that if there are any BBC people watching the show today, we've been led to believe that there are now a small cluster of BBC employees who are tuning into UK Column Live. We're delighted that you're now joining us, and maybe, just maybe, you can force your bosses to start reporting some of the real truth as it happens. UK Column's always enjoyed hypocrisy by politicians, and the Mirror's picking up here on Labour MP Luciana Berger, bit of an unfortunate name because she's been busy making little films because she's discovered that a lot of people in Britain can't afford to feed themselves. This article is all about her views on how terrible it is, and of course she blames the present situation entirely on David Cameron and the Tories, when of course we are fully aware that the agenda to collapse Britain as a nation state was put into place originally with Mr Heath Tory, but carried on by the Labour Party and particularly Tony Blair and Gordon Brown. So good-looking young lady, looks pretty well fed to me, but she suddenly discovered the reality of what's happening in the country. So what has she done about it? Has she criticised Ed Miliband? Has she got stuck in Parliament? No, she's gone to make a film. But there's some interesting statistics in the article. It says over the past 5 years, food prices have rocketed, and last year's average family shopping bill rose by £233, and the effect has been dramatic. In 2009, 26,000 people in total relied on food aid. This year's food charity Fair Share is helping to feed 36,500 people every day. So
just to understand that, 2009, for the whole year, there were 26,000 people requiring food aid, and now one of the charities is feeding 36,500 people per day.
yes, although of course it doesn't say whether that 26,000 was daily within the year. There's a bit of questioning on the statistics, but I take your point.
Yeah.
Well, we can look into that. But here we are, we're living in Britain, one of the wealthiest countries in the world. In 2012, the country has now been wrecked by the combined efforts of the Tory party, Labour and Lib Dem, to the effect that people are having difficulty feeding themselves. And here we have an MP whose solution is to go and film the misery.
Well, just the final point on this that I would make is that you know, economic events tend to happen in the United States before they come here.
Yeah.
If we're seeing this rise of people requiring food stamps in the US and policies aren't changing, that problem is on its way here in a big way. So, you know, give it another 6 months or so and we'll see this increasing even more.
Indeed, and of course we've been advising people to make sure that they have got stocks of food at home should this crisis emerge quicker than we anticipate it will. So from feeding ourselves, of course, we've still got money to spend on defence. Without going too deeply into the rights and wrong of that argument, we wanted to just point out here that in Britain, as a leading country in the world, we're still having trouble producing military equipment. So British Aerospace is now crowing because it's won a £1.2 billion contract to build another nuclear attack submarine, HMS Audacious. Of course, this is the same submarine of the Astute class, HMS Astute, which not only ran aground but has then since been found to have problems, massive problems with corrosion and flooding. Key thing is that we are seeing that the whole of the technical and industrial skills base in this country is being closed down effectively, and this is the type of result, so that as a major nation state we can't produce large-scale engineering projects. And of course, is David Cameron and the Tory party investing in skills training and apprenticeships for young people? Absolutely not. So we can expect to see these problems continue.
But BAE Systems has won this contract. This is the same BAE Systems that Cameron is absolutely determined to sell to some foreign country, right?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Just,
Well,
just as long as I
we've
understand
had
that.
some interesting emails actually in the last couple of days where people have been pointing out to us that Mr. Cameron is very, very good on his overseas arms sales, and we wonder whether his attention is more on overseas wars in order to sell the arms than his attention is on looking after people in Britain. Stay posted. Well, one of my favourite ladies in the next picture, can't remember her name actually.
Harriet.
Oh, it's Harriet, yes. Well, of course, she's now getting her nose into Leveson inquiry and control of the press. And you've picked up a couple of interesting things on this.
Well, she's arguing that we should hand over control of the new Press Standards Trust. So they're clearly changing the name of the Media Standards Trust to the Press Standards Trust. That's a flippant remark, by the way. So the new Press Standards Trust should be controlled by the Lord Chief Justice. Now, as you pointed out, I believe last week, who is it? Just remind me, is up for the job of Lord Chief Justice?
I think it's a gentleman called Leveson.
Really?
Yeah.
What a coincidence.
Yeah.
So
Well, the man who ran the inquiry is then promoted to lead what he promotes.
Right, so he becomes Lord Chief Justice, and now her bill is proposing that the Lord Chief Justice becomes in charge of his own results of his inquiry.
Yeah.
Incredible. So anyway, in the next slide then we have from Politics Home, if anybody actually wants to read the proposed bill, but she is arguing that Lord Chief Justice should be in charge, a legally binding plan for the country's top judge to oversee newspaper standards, and she's going to set that out today. And apparently Ed Miliband has been talking to Nikki Clegg about that, so perhaps they will be the next coalition, who knows?
Well, of course, if you want to run a dictatorship, and that's what the cross-party political agenda is all about, creating a dictatorship in Britain, you must be in control of the press. And what better way than to actually get judges running the law system?
Yeah.
Of course, we wouldn't possibly say that if we look over the track record of Britain's judges over the last 20 years, we will find more than their fair share of sex perverts and paedophiles. Quite possibly they wouldn't want to be reported in the press.
Well, just to close this, Harriet said, this gives clarity and certainty. Lord Justice Leveson said in his report that a legal guarantee to underpin self-regulation was essential, and this draft bill provides it. And then she went on to deny that it would create a slippery slope where future governments would seek to crack down on critical media.
Yeah, well, I think that's already happened.
Yeah.
So perhaps she's telling porcupines. Of course, the main thing about press censorship is the fact that if the press can be censored, we can cover up the paedophile activity. And it's very, very interesting what's happening around Jimmy Savile. The BBC, of course, is utterly silent. And of course, the only people at the moment being pulled in for investigation are people who are in the media world, pop stars. So the Mail here talking about another man in his 60s arrested by police investigating sex abuse by Jimmy Savile. They've packed the article with pictures of some of the people who've been hauled in, obviously accused at the moment. But what we're actually not seeing is anything tangible about full and proper investigations into why Savile and how Savile was able to get access to Broadmoor. We're not seeing the connections through to people in Parliament. It was quite interesting that the Connaught Rooms on Sunday at Ian Crane's event, the subject of the media came up, and many people in the audience felt that the whole of the Leveson inquiry was in order to take control of the press in order to stop the truth about the high-level paedophile rings coming out. And I was quite surprised actually at the strength of feeling by many of the people in the audience. Their view was that the government is terrified of the paedophiles in Westminster being exposed, and so they'd gone flat out to take control of the press. We'll just call up a picture of Harriet. I think it's important to remind people, here's this woman attempting to control the press, but in her background with the organisation Liberty, National Council for Civil Liberty, she was helping to encourage the idea that pornographic pictures of children should be an okay thing. So here's this lady, of course, advising the nation on paedophilia and how to control the press. We'll just screen through that one. This is the man himself, of course, Lord Falconer. He's also been helping this. So here we have judges who, if you actually analyse it, are totally unaccountable because Ken Clark, for example, is putting these people in charge of courts with no jury, and now these people are standing up and telling us how we're going to control the press. And Lord Falconer, of course, is interesting in advising us not only on control of the press, but also euthanasia as well. Here is the Sun picking up on the story, and of course we've got David Cameron, I must say looking particularly gormless in this picture, but David Cameron will today tell editors that they must set up the tough new watchdog. And under the Hypocrisy Prize, we're going to give it to David Cameron today because, of course, this is the man who withheld his own emails from Leveson. Why should he do that? Well, we just have a look at what he and his chums have been up to. So Chris Patton, of course, head of the BBC Trustees, Common Purpose Guru, so the organisation that clearly has massively influenced the hacking inquiry, pushed for the setting up of the Leveson inquiry itself. Common Purpose riddled, or the BBC riddled with Common Purpose, and here's Chris Patton promoting the very same organisation. David Cameron doing the same, so clearly Common Purpose is not a left-wing old boys network. This is a very dangerous cross-party agenda.
Is he embarrassed about this, that he's got his back to the camera? Because usually he's quite happy to have his face.
Well, I did have a picture of his face, but this one actually showed him sitting down and doing the business. So here's David Cameron promoting the political charity that was used to attack the free press and media in order to set up Leveson. This was a workshop, I think it was done last year, so it's not a recent photograph, but irrefutable proof that David Cameron is Common Purpose. We got strange things going on in the media, and obviously the very sad story of the nurse at the London hospital dying, having given information away about the happy royal couple. What is incredible is the reporting in the press. So the Mail headline here has said that this hoaxed nurse died of shame. Now, I'm not quite sure what the physical attribute is of dying of shame, but here's the big headline: this woman died of shame. But of course the reality, if we look into it a bit more deeply, is that we don't know how this lady died. And there's a comment here by her mother-in-law, Carmine Barbosa, who says, "I want to know about the circumstances of her death and nobody is giving me an answer. She used to stay at the nurses' quarters and go home to be with her children on her days off. So no, I don't know who will look after my grandchildren." But what an interesting statement. Already we've got one of the relatives actually saying, how did this lady die? There's something, I think, very, very strange in this story and what's gone on in the hospital.
I think we just should keep an eye on this story and keep an eye particularly on the grandchildren, because as we know from the couple that were shot dead in the Alps, their children have been taken into care. These children may be considered vulnerable at this point, and the next thing we know, they'll be taken away from the grandparents. Particularly if perhaps, I realise that the grandmother's stressed and grieving at the moment, but to suggest that she doesn't know who will look after the grandchildren, it may be a red rag to a bull.
Well, we will see.
Yeah.
The other thing I think we'll just comment on is, of course, a spokesperson for the, did I say that, spokesperson? There was a bit of politically correct language. A spokesman for the hospital said that basically she'd destroyed the honour of the hospital. I thought it was a quite bizarre expression. So could it be that intense pressure was put on this lady by the hospital because the royal reputation had been undermined? There's something very dirty to my mind behind this story. And the Australians are not taking it lying down because, as the Mail's reporting here, Australians are accusing the British press of a witch hunt over the radio team that actually made the call to the hospital. Although if you do read through the article, the Mail does say that at the end of the day it was just a prank. So I think we'll end there. Keep your eye on what's happening. What we are essentially saying is at the moment there is a smokescreen of propaganda and misreporting going through the mainstream press in order to actually distract us from the fact that the government is closing down the country step by step. Of course, if you'd like to do something about it, expose it, talk to a friend, email, speak out, challenge your MPs, and above all, if you don't like it, withdraw your consent. So on that happy note, we will leave you. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you tomorrow at the same time.